It's time to cut open probably the most American boot by the most American boot brand, see if they live up to all the hype, and cut them in half and see what's inside. And this is the second half of the 100,000 subscriber mark milestone videos. Last time we did the $1,000 Jordans, cut these in half, and now we're doing these. So thanks for everyone that's subscribed up to this point. If you haven't subscribed, consider subscribing, because we're gonna keep doing boots and shoes and maybe start doing some high-end luxury brand bags and coats and belts and stuff. So now let's talk a little bit about these boots. So the brand of these boots is obviously Redwing. The model is the Iron Ranger, and the leather I got is, I think, their most popular leather. It's the copper rough and tough leather, I think is what it's called. They retail for $329.99, and you guys asked me to start weighing the boots so we can compare them that way. These weighed 1 pound, 14 ounces, and these are 100% made in America. I wore these boots around for the weekend. I was working on my motorcycle, so I beat them up pretty bad. And also, a lot of you guys keep asking where the Triumph build is at, and I'm working on it. I'm probably just gonna do one video that covers the entire build, but if you wanna see more of the day-to-day process of rebuilding that Triumph, it's on my Instagram. I usually work on the weekends. But for my initial impressions of these, they do run a little bit large. On the website, they recommend getting half a size smaller or a full size smaller than what you usually get. And I think that's true. These are a little bit big for me, and these are really stiff when you get them, which is usually a good sign for a nice quality boot. It's gonna take a little while to break these in. They're a lot stiffer than like the Doc Martens. They're way stiffer than the RM Williams. And they're probably the most stiff, hardest leather boot that we've reviewed up to this point. Redwings, they're such a big company that a lot of people, I think, discredit them and don't think they live up to their heritage roots and style and construction techniques. But these are a heavy duty boot. I was really impressed by how thick the leather is and how high quality the leather is. So now let's go over a few of the features of these boots that kind of separate them from the rest of the boots we've torn apart. So first, let's talk about the leather. So this is an oil tanned leather, which is really just a chrome tanned leather that has a lot of oils infused into it. And what that does is it's kind of a self-conditioning boot where you don't have to condition this nearly as often as a veg tan boot. And those oils kind of protect the boot from the environment. They don't absorb nearly as much water, and they don't take as much care. And that's why you see a lot more of the chrome tan in the boot category, especially these heritage style boots compared to like dress boot, because veg tan leather is gonna absorb water a lot more, and it's gonna take a lot more care to make it so it doesn't crack, because it's just a drier leather. This is also a full grain leather, so you can see some of the little scars and stuff. Like on this side, you can see a little bug bite, I think, or something there. A lot of people don't like seeing the natural flaws in leather. I love it. I think it's cool to see the natural state of the leather and not have tons of dyes on top of it. And then for the thickness of the leather, I don't have an exact reading on that yet because my little caliper doesn't reach to where I can get a single layer. Another thing that a lot of people say when they're reviewing these boots is they're a little bulbish? I don't know what the correct word of that is, but I don't think they're that bad. I think a lot of people get a little self-conscious when they're looking straight down at the boots they're wearing. But I don't think these are nearly as bad as everyone says they are online. And these are like too big for me, and they still didn't look like clown shoes to me. Next, let's talk about the toe cap. So a lot of you guys probably already know this, but it's worth repeating. So what is the purpose of having an extra layer on top of the toe here? So these are originally work boots, and a lot of people wear out spots on the toes from kicking stuff or rubbing on stuff. And so a toe cap allows you to have an extra layer of protection there, but also when it comes time to resole your boots or replace that patch, instead of replacing the entire vamp, which is this all through here, you just replace that toe cap. So it's an easier repair job, it's a cheaper repair job, and it's faster. And so a lot of boot companies have just kind of adopted that and made it more of a style thing. But the cool thing about these boots is this is very much a true representation of what a toe cap is used for, because you can see it's got the 4 lines of stitching and it's a really heavy, thick piece of leather. So I really like this toe cap, that it's not just for style. Next thing is this stitch style on these boots. So this is, if you watched the how to tell if your Doc Martens are fake, we talked about the Puritan stitch or the chain stitch. And this boot has a lot of that chain stitching. It's got chain stitching through here and then up over where the counter cap. This is all chain stitched. So what is chain stitching? Chain stitching is the style of stitching where most sewing machines do a lock stitch, where the thread is hooked together and it's dependent on each other for strength. Well, this kind of loops the thread around itself, and we'll do a close-up so you can see what I'm talking about. This is a stronger stitch, and it allows for a little bit more movement without wearing that thread out. And so that's why you see a lot of chain stitching in areas where you've got a lot of movement and torsion and flex and movement, because it's a stronger stitch for that type of area. One cool thing about these Redwings is if you look closely, you can see some shininess around the threads here. And the way that they do their stitching is they've got like a little vat of wax. And as the thread gets pulled through that wax, it's waxing the threads as you're stitching. And then as the boot goes through the rest of the building, that wax dries and you get that little layer of shininess on there. Now let's talk about what we know about the construction of these boots. And one thing that's really cool about Redwing is they cut open a lot of their boots already. Like if you go to the Redwing store, sometimes they'll have a boot that's cut in half so you can see how they're built, which I think is cool because it's like a sign of a company that's proud of how their boots are built. So we know a lot before we cut them in half. So let's go through what we do know. So starting with the sole, this is a Vibram mini lug sole. They switched it from the previous sole. They didn't have any traction on it. It was just flat, to this mini lug sole. And this is a rubber sole, and this is a really good sole for someone who wants that traction of having some tread, but doesn't want those big lugs like on my Chippewa boots. These are like my hiking and hunting boots. They've got a big chunky Vibram sole on them. And if that's not your style, these are a good alternative because you're not gonna slip nearly as much, and they have that low profile. The outsole is stitched on with a 270-degree Goodyear welt, which means it doesn't go all the way around the heel. It stops where the heel begins, and it just goes around the toe. Let me know what you guys know about this, and maybe you can help educate me on benefits of a 270 welt. But moving up, I believe there's a cork midsole in here. Cork midsoles are really nice because they break into the shape of your foot instead of just being like a hard plastic or something that's not gonna mold to your foot. Cork compresses over time, so it gives you nice contoured edges and a footprint basically, so it makes it more comfortable and your weight of your foot's more evenly distributed. And then above that would be your leather insole. The thing I like about this leather insole over a fiberboard insole, like most of the boots that we've torn apart, is it's not gonna stink. Leather is a natural antibacterial, so it's not gonna smell like a shoe as fast as a cheaper boot. It's gonna break into your foot more fully, just like that cork midsole is gonna do, and it's just longer lasting. It's not gonna break apart. And then on top of that, right at the heel, you've got a little sock liner there that just covers the nails that go into the heel block. And then you've got the upper, and we kind of talked about the leather for the upper. Oh, and there is also, I forgot to mention this, there is also a steel shank in here, I'm pretty sure. So now that we kind of know the general construction, let's cut these in half and see if that really is what's going on inside. There's a few questions I have about these boots that cutting them in half will hopefully help answer. These are gonna be more painful for me to cut apart than these $1,000 sneakers, because I've been wanting a pair of these for so long, but let's cut them in half. Am I sweaty? Yeah, this kicked my butt. We didn't even get all the way through the shank. Just pulled it out halfway through. This is a super wide shank, but let's see what's inside. Well, that was quite the battle getting through this boot. Part of the reason was I cut right through the middle of this giant nail, and then the big reason was this giant shank they have in this boot. So this is a triple rib shank. Most of the shanks that we've seen are a single rib, and they're about half the width of this one. And usually I'm really good at just kind of skirting along the side of the shank without cutting through it. So this one I went straight through the middle and then it came out. So I'll cut the rest of this in half and get it installed back in the one boot half for display purposes. And if you want half of a Iron Ranger, I will tell you how to win it at the end of the video. So I'll probably cut this other one in half and give out one of the sides because apparently people like that. Now let's go through the layers of what's going on in here and if there's anything else that we missed in our initial breakdown. You've got the rubber outsole, a cork filler on the midsole. You've got the shank, it was wider than I expected. You've got the really thick layer of leather for the insole. I'm actually really impressed at how thick this leather is on the insole. Compared to the $500 RM Williams, it's even thicker than the RM Williams. So that's gonna conform more to your foot. It's going to last longer. It's just, I think it's better to have it a little bit thicker. And then one thing that was really surprising is these nails that go through. I knew it was nailed, but they're pretty substantial nails. I think next, let's rip the rest of this out, rip the guts out of it, and kind of see what else is going on because we still don't know what the counter's made out of. And it still can't really measure the thickness of the leather. So let's cut the rest of this apart. These well-made boots are such a pain to tear apart. Like I'm literally sore the next day after doing this style of boots. So let's go through some things that we didn't know right off the bat. So the heel block is put on by these clinch nails. It's a pretty common thing to see in well-made footwear. So clinch nails, basically, they hammer them on through the boot, they hit the anvil, and it causes those nails to clinch over and make a little hook. That allows them to not be easily pulled out, as you can see by my struggle. There's clinch nails that hold the heel block on, and then there's also another set of nails that hold this part of the sole onto the insole as well. Another thing, you can see how many layers are in this toe box. So we've got the 2 layers of leather, and you've got another layer of some black material. It's like a fabric reinforced rubber is what I would call it, for lack of a real term. And opening this up, you can see a little bit better detail of the chain stitching or the Puritan stitch. The counter was one of the questions we had. So this counter is a compressed cardboard counter. So now we can finally reach in far enough to test the leather. Yeah, it looks like about 2 millimeters to 2.25-ish in that area. So pretty thick leather. It looks like there's little inserts inside this heel block that prevent these nails, these clinch nails, from going too far, which is really interesting. And I don't know if we talked about the purpose of the sock liner, but it's basically just a thin layer to cover up those nails. So it just goes on right there to cover those nails up. Otherwise, you'd see those at the bottom of your shoe and potentially compress that leather enough that it might snag on a sock, or you might feel it in your heel. Have you guys ever had any experience where you could feel the nails in your heel? It's a pretty common way of doing it. Most of the big boot companies that produce high quality boots do it this exact same way. So now the question is, do these live up to all the hype surrounding them? I think they do. I was really impressed with the leather quality, how they're built, the materials on the inside and how freaking hard it was to tear apart. I think these are a good boot that's gonna last a long time. They should last through several resoles. I'm really impressed with these boots. Obviously, there's some things that could be improved. Like if we're getting nitpicky, it'd be nice to have a leather counter in there. Maybe an extra layer of leather between the outsole and the cork filling. I've seen that in some boots. But a lot of these features, you're gonna pay another $200 for, and you're gonna get into the Whites and Nicks and Westco area. So this is a nice mid-range price boot. So what do you get for the $300 boot? The main thing that most people like in these boots is that they're American made. Pretty much everything on this boot is American made, starting with the leather from the tannery they own all the way down to the construction. And a lot of the testing and manufacturing and the forms and the molds, everything is done in-house in America by Americans. So if that's your thing, this is a really good boot if you're trying to support your American made goods. So you end up paying for that. So that's why you've got that price difference between a $200 boot that's made in China versus a $330 boot that's made in America. So that pretty much wraps up the Redwing Iron Ranger boot review. If you want to win this boot, all you got to do is subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow me on Instagram at rose_anvil, and like and comment on the post of the boot breakdown of this particular boot. Basically has all the different parts labeled, and then we'll select a comment in a couple weeks to choose a winner. And if you want to see some people who wore these longer than a couple days and get their opinions on them, one of them is Stridewise. Next one is Carl Mirowski, I think is how you say his name. Oh, and the Boot Guy. Those three channels have all done reviews of these boots. So if you want more Iron Ranger information, check out their channels. And if you want to buy these boots and not cut them in half, I'll put a link to the listing from Redwing in the description so you can go buy them because they're really nice boots. Thanks for all your guys' support, and be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to help this video out. These $1,000 sneakers it's gonna be a hard one to recoup the cost, but same with these ones. So anything you guys can do to help this video out is very much appreciated. So thanks for everything. See ya.